I still remember the ice-cold feeling of the bathroom tiles at 2 a.m., my body drenched in sweat from a 102-degree fever as I struggled with our clogged toilet. I thought my wife was bringing medicine, but Margaret just held up her phone, recording me with a smirk. I never imagined my lowest moment would become entertainment for strangers and how that heartless act would awaken something new inside me. Where are you watching this video from? Leave a comment below and hit subscribe to discover the unbelievable ending to this story. Our marriage had seemed picture perfect from the outside. I met Margaret during a company networking event 6 years ago. She worked in marketing for a high-end fashion brand while I made a steady income as a software engineer. At 34, I was content with my career trajectory and financial stability. Margaret was 32, ambitious, and had expensive taste. Her desire for luxury was something I initially found charming, but it eventually became the wedge that drove us apart. The first few years were good. We complemented each other well. My calm, introverted nature balanced her outgoing personality. I handled our finances responsibly, making sure we saved for retirement while still enjoying occasional splurges. Margaret brought spontaneity and social connections into my otherwise routine life. We lived in a modest but comfortable apartment in a nice neighborhood, and I thought we were building toward a future together. Things began changing around our 4th anniversary. Margaret started spending more time with a new group of friends from work, all married to wealthy executives or successful entrepreneurs. These women lived in mansions, wore designer clothes, and took exotic vacations several times a year. Their husbands drove luxury cars and belonged to exclusive country clubs. With each gathering, I noticed Margaret coming home more dissatisfied with our life. "Why can we not afford a house like Stephanie and Thomas?" she would ask after weekend brunches. "Their view of the lake is incredible. Thomas just got promoted again, and he is taking Stephanie to Paris next month." I tried explaining that we were on different career paths, that Thomas worked in investment banking while I preferred the stability and work-life balance of my current position. We could get a bigger place if we wanted to stretch our budget, I would offer, but then we would have to cut back on other things. This reasonable approach only irritated Margaret more. "Why do you always have to be so practical? So boring. Other men find ways to give their wives what they want." The comparisons increased, becoming a daily occurrence. If I suggested a weekend getaway to a nearby beach town, she would scoff and mention how her friend Jessica was going to the Maldives. When I brought home flowers, she would point out how Amanda's husband had surprised her with a diamond bracelet for no special occasion. Nothing I did was ever enough. As Margaret spent more time with her affluent friends, her attitude toward me shifted from mild disappointment to active disdain. She began making snide remarks about my clothes, my haircut, even the way I ate. When we attended social gatherings together, she would introduce me with qualifiers. "This is my husband, Brent. He works in software. Nothing exciting." The warmth that had once existed between us evaporated, replaced by her contempt and my growing resentment. Still, I tried to make things work. I took on additional projects at work, hoping for a bonus that might impress her. I updated my wardrobe and started working out more desperately, attempting to become the husband she seemed to want. But nothing changed her increasingly negative perception of me. The incident with the toilet happened during a particularly tense period in our marriage. Margaret had been planning a weekend trip to a luxury spa resort with her friends for months. They had booked couples, massages, wine tastings, and private yoga sessions. The packages cost nearly $2,000 per couple, which I thought excessive, but I agreed because I hoped it might improve our relationship. 2 days before the trip, I came down with a severe case of the flu. My temperature spiked to 102 degrees. My body ached, and I could barely get out of bed. The doctor advised rest and plenty of fluids. There was no way I could attend the weekend getaway. Margaret was furious. "You always ruin everything," she hissed, pacing around our bedroom. "What am I supposed to tell everyone? That my husband is too weak to handle a little cold?" "It is not a cold," I explained weakly from under the covers. "The doctor said it could be serious if I do not rest." "Well, I am still going," she declared. "Stephanie's husband had pneumonia last month, and he still made it to their anniversary cruise. He just took some medicine and pushed through it." I did not have the energy to argue, so I simply nodded and closed my eyes, hoping sleep would bring relief from both the fever and Margaret's disappointment. For the next day, she barely acknowledged my existence, stepping over me when I had to lie down on the cool bathroom floor during particularly bad fever spikes. She was busy packing and coordinating last-minute details with her friends. No soup was offered, no cold compress for my forehead, not even a glass of water unless I specifically asked. The night before her trip, disaster struck. Our only toilet became severely clogged. No amount of plunging seemed to help. Water rose dangerously close to the rim with each flush attempt. "We need to call an emergency plumber," Margaret demanded, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. I checked the time on my phone through bleary eyes. It was 11:30 p.m. "An emergency call will cost triple the normal rate," I pointed out. "Maybe we can try again in the morning, or I can look up some additional techniques online." Margaret's face contorted with rage. "I leave tomorrow morning. I need to shower and get ready. I cannot believe you are being so cheap about this. Ryan would never make Stephanie deal with a broken toilet. He would have a plumber here in 30 minutes regardless of the cost." The mention of Ryan and Stephanie, for what felt like the 100th time that week, ignited something in me despite my weakened state. "I will fix it myself," I said firmly. "Just give me some time." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "Of course you will. Because God forbid we spend money on actual professionals who know what they are doing." By 2 a.m., my fever had spiked again, but I was determined to fix the toilet before collapsing back into bed. I had watched several tutorial videos online and gathered the necessary tools. My head pounded and chills ran through my body as I knelt on the cold bathroom floor, trying to focus on the task at hand rather than my miserable physical state. The bathroom light felt painfully bright against my fever-sensitive eyes. Sweat dripped from my forehead onto the tiles as I struggled with the toilet auger I had purchased months ago for minor clogs. My hands trembled from weakness, making precise movements difficult. Each twist of the tool sent waves of nausea through my stomach, but I persisted, desperate to solve this problem, and returned to bed. I heard footsteps approaching and felt a momentary surge of hope. Perhaps Margaret had reconsidered her coldness and was bringing me some medicine, or at least a glass of water. I turned toward the doorway, my vision slightly blurred from fever. Instead of seeing a caring gesture, I found my wife standing there with her phone pointed directly at me, a smirk playing on her lips. At first, I did not understand what was happening. Then I heard her speaking not to me but to her phone. "Ladies, meet my pathetic excuse for a husband," she narrated in a mocking tone. "Cannot even afford a plumber. Look how he crawls around like a desperate cockroach." The words hit me like physical blows. I stared at her in disbelief, unable to process that my own wife would record me at my most vulnerable and share it for entertainment. Through my fever haze, I recognized she was sending this to her group chat, the same women whose husbands she constantly compared me to. "Margaret, please stop." I managed to say, my voice barely audible. "This is not okay." She ignored my plea, completely continuing her narration. "See what I have to deal with. Ryan would have called a professional immediately. Thomas would have replaced the entire bathroom by now. But no, I get this." I could hear the notifications pinging as responses from her friends came through. Margaret laughed at something on her screen, completely unbothered by my obvious distress. "Can you turn around again? The angle where you were hunched over the toilet was perfect," she directed, as if I were performing in some degrading reality show for her amusement. "Turn off the camera," I said more firmly this time, anger beginning to cut through my fever fog. "This is humiliating." "Oh, please lighten up," Margaret scoffed. "The girls think this is hilarious. Jessica says her housekeeper could do a better job than you." I returned to my work, trying to ignore her presence, but the damage was done. I could feel her continuing to record, capturing every awkward movement, every grimace of pain, every moment of weakness. My hands shook more violently now, partly from illness and partly from the rage and humiliation building inside me. The argument that followed was brief but intense. I demanded she delete the video. She refused, claiming I was overreacting. When I pointed out how hurtful her actions were, she dismissed my feelings entirely. "Everyone shares things like this now," she said with a shrug. "It is just social media. Nobody cares." But it was more than just sharing with her immediate friends. As I continued working on the toilet, determined to finish despite everything, I heard the distinctive sound of an Instagram post being uploaded. Glancing up, I saw Margaret adding filters and a caption to the video of me. "What are you doing now?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Just posting this quality content," she replied casually. "This is what rock bottom looks like." My stomach dropped. Not only had she shared my vulnerable moment with her friends, but now she was broadcasting it to hundreds of followers, many of whom I knew personally, including colleagues from work. Within minutes, notifications started flooding in. Margaret read some of the comments aloud, laughing at particularly cruel ones. "Sarah says, 'You look like a drowned rat.'" And Thomas commented, "And I thought I had maintenance issues at our lake house." Each comment felt like another nail in the coffin of my dignity. People I had met at company events, friends of friends, even some of my own distant acquaintances, were now viewing and mocking one of my lowest moments. The laughing emojis and disparaging comments piled up, turning my private struggle into public entertainment. Despite the humiliation burning through me, something hardened in my core. I refused to stop until the job was finished. Each insulting comment Margaret read aloud only strengthened my resolve to complete the repair. My focus narrowed to the task at hand, blocking out everything else. After nearly 2 hours of painstaking work fighting through fever and nausea, I finally identified and removed the obstruction. The toilet flushed perfectly. I cleaned up my tools and the area around the toilet, moving with a calm precision that came from a place beyond anger. "It is fixed," I said flatly, washing my hands thoroughly. Margaret, who had eventually gotten bored with recording and moved to the bedroom, called out, "Great. Now maybe you can let me sleep. Some of us have important plans tomorrow." I did not respond. Instead, I took my pillow and a blanket to the living room sofa. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, something fundamental shifted within me. The fever still raged through my body, but my mind had never been clearer. This was not a marriage. This was not love. This was not how someone who cared about you treated you at your most vulnerable. I fell into a restless sleep around 4 a.m. My dreams filled with mocking laughter and endless maze like bathroom hallways. When I woke the next morning, Margaret had already left for her weekend getaway, without so much as a note or a glass of water left by my side. The morning after the toilet incident, I dragged myself from the sofa to check my phone. My fever had broken somewhat, but my body still ached from both illness and hours, hunched over on the bathroom floor. What I saw on my screen made me physically recoil. Margaret's Instagram post had gained traction overnight. Nearly 300 likes and dozens of comments populated the post. Most were laughing at my expense, some offering sympathy to Margaret for being stuck with such a useless husband, while others tagged their spouses with comments like, "At least you are not this bad," or "Be grateful. I do not post you at your worst." I scrolled through the comments with increasing disbelief. These were not just strangers. Many were people we knew, socially, colleagues of Margaret, and even a few of my own co-workers who followed her. The public humiliation was complete. My private moment of vulnerability had become entertainment for our entire social circle. What struck me most was not just the cruelty of the post itself, but the complete absence of any recognition from Margaret that she had crossed a line. There was no apologetic text, no "maybe I went too far" message. Instead, she had added more commentary from the resort, freedom from plumbing issues, and enjoying mimosas with real men who know how to treat women. As I sat there staring at my phone in a kind of stunned trance, something unexpected happened. Rather than feeling more humiliated or depressed, I felt a strange clarity washing over me. This incident had merely made visible what had been true for a long time. My wife did not respect me, did not love me, and possibly never had. I called my friend Frank later that afternoon, once I felt strong enough to hold a conversation. Frank and I had been friends since college, but we had drifted somewhat since my marriage to Margaret, who found him too average for her social aspirations. I saw the post, Frank said immediately. Brent, man, that was way out of line. How are you holding up? The simple acknowledgement of the wrongness of Margaret's action was like a lifeline. Not great, I admitted. But I think it might have been a wake-up call I needed. What followed was the most honest conversation I had had in years. Frank did not hold back. This has been going on for a long time, Brent. Every time we get together, she puts you down. Remember when she corrected your story about getting that promotion, or when she interrupted you at Jim's barbecue to tell everyone you had the facts wrong about your own project? I did remember, and as Frank continued listing incidents, a pattern emerged that I had somehow normalized over time. Margaret regularly undermined me in public, dismissed my achievements, and framed any success I had as lucky breaks rather than the result of hard work and skill. That is emotional abuse, man, Frank said bluntly. If a guy treated his wife the way Margaret treats you, everyone would be telling her to leave him. The word abuse hit me hard. I had never thought of my situation in those terms. I had always framed Margaret's behavior as her having high standards or being stressed about her own career pressures. But the toilet video had stripped away those excuses. There was no justifying recording someone at their most vulnerable and sharing it for laughs. When did I become this person, I asked Frank. When did I start accepting this treatment as normal? It happens gradually, Frank said. But the question is, what are you going to do now? That question lingered with me for the rest of the day. What was I going to do? As my physical strength slowly returned, my mental resolve strengthened. By the time evening arrived, I had the beginnings of a plan. First, I needed to understand our financial situation completely. Margaret and I had joint accounts for most expenses, but we each maintained separate accounts as well. I logged into our shared accounts and began reviewing transactions from the past year. What I found was alarming. Margaret had been making increasingly large withdrawals, often coinciding with her weekends with friends. Shopping sprees labeled as work necessities, spa treatments, expensive restaurants, designer handbags. Her spending had increased dramatically in the past 6 months, far outpacing our budget agreements. I also discovered several credit cards I had not known existed, linked to our joint account for minimum payments. Margaret had accumulated nearly $20,000 in credit card debt, all while complaining that I was too frugal and did not provide enough. This discovery hardened my resolve. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer specializing in divorce cases. I explained my situation without emotion, laying out the financial discrepancies and the pattern of emotional abuse, including the recent video incident. The lawyer, a straightforward woman named Diana, listened carefully before offering her assessment. "You have grounds for a fairly clean divorce," she said. "The financial records will help establish a pattern of deception. The public humiliation via social media could factor in as well. My advice is to gather all documentation and prepare for her return. Do not confront her until we have everything in place." Over the next 2 days, as Margaret enjoyed her luxury weekend with friends, I set my plan in motion. I moved half of our joint savings into my personal account, an amount that reflected my contributions minus Margaret's excessive spending. I documented all the hidden credit cards and unexpected debt. I began looking for a new place to live, something affordable but nice, closer to my office. I found a modern one-bedroom apartment in a secure building with a view of the city park. It was smaller than our current place but felt like a fresh start. I put down a deposit, arranging to move in the following week. At work, I spoke with my supervisor about taking on a new project I had previously declined due to its demanding schedule. The project came with a substantial increase in salary and potential for advancement. My boss was thrilled by my sudden availability and enthusiasm. "Whatever has changed in your personal life," he said, "it seems to be good for your career ambitions." I smiled, realizing how much I had held myself back trying to accommodate Margaret's social calendar and constant criticisms. For years, I had turned down opportunities that required evening work or occasional travel because Margaret complained I was never available for her events. Now I felt free to pursue my true potential. By the time Margaret was due to return from her weekend away, I had transformed from the fever-weakened man on the bathroom floor to someone with purpose and a clear path forward. I had rediscovered my self-respect, and with it came a strength I had forgotten I possessed. When Margaret returned from her weekend retreat, she brought with her shopping bags from exclusive boutiques and a renewed sense of superiority. She barely acknowledged me as she unpacked her new purchases, tossing receipt after receipt onto our bed without a hint of guilt over the extravagant spending. "The resort was amazing," she announced, not bothering to ask about my health or how I had recovered from the flu. "Stephanie and Ryan are thinking about buying a vacation property nearby. We should consider it too." In the past, this would have launched an argument about our finances, with me trying to explain budgetary constraints, and Margaret accusing me of lacking ambition. This time I simply nodded and said, "That sounds expensive." My neutral tone caught her off guard. She looked up from her unpacking, studying my face for the first time since her return. "Are you still upset about that stupid video? Everyone thought it was hilarious. You need to learn to laugh at yourself more." "I am not upset," I replied calmly. "I am just not interested in a vacation property." This simple, direct response seemed to unsettle her more than any argument would have. She kept glancing at me throughout the evening, clearly trying to understand the shift in my demeanor. I remained polite, but distant, refusing to engage in her attempts to provoke a reaction. Over the next few days, I maintained this new approach. I stopped trying to please Margaret or seek her approval. When she criticized my cooking, I simply said, "Feel free to make something else." When she complained about my choice of clothing for a dinner with her friends, I replied, "This is what I am comfortable wearing." The change in my behavior clearly bothered Margaret. She vacillated between increased criticism, trying to push me back into my old patterns of appeasement, and unusual attempts at kindness, bringing home my favorite dessert, or suggesting we watch a movie I had mentioned wanting to see. At work, I threw myself into the new project, often staying late to collaborate with team members. I began building stronger professional relationships, accepting lunch invitations I would have previously declined to accommodate Margaret's expectations that I be available by phone throughout the day. My new apartment was nearly ready, and I had begun quietly moving essential items when Margaret was out. Nothing obvious enough to raise immediate suspicion, just important documents, sentimental items from before our marriage, and a few changes of clothes. Margaret first noticed something was truly different when she saw me packing my laptop bag one evening, including items that would not normally go to the office. "What are you doing?" she asked, suspicion evident in her voice. "Why are you taking your backup hard drive to work?" "I need some files for the project," I answered simply. "You have been acting strange all week," she said, crossing her arms. "Are you seeing someone else? Is that what this is about?" The accusation was so ironic that I almost laughed. Margaret had been emotionally checked out of our marriage for years, yet her first assumption was that my newfound independence must indicate infidelity on my part. "No, Margaret, I am not seeing anyone else." She followed me into our bedroom, watching as I selected a particular tie from my collection, one given to me by my father that I rarely wore but valued greatly. "Then why are you taking your things? I noticed your college yearbooks are gone from the shelf, and your collection of vintage concert tickets. What is going on?" This was the confrontation I had been preparing for. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and faced my wife directly. "I am leaving," I said simply. "I have found my own place. I will be moving out completely this weekend." Her face went through a rapid succession of emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, and then calculation. "This is ridiculous," she scoffed. "Where would you even go?" You cannot afford a decent place on your own. My new apartment is signed and paid for, I replied. The first month's rent and security deposit are handled. You cannot just leave, she insisted, her voice rising. What about our life here? What about all our plans? What plans, Margaret, your plans for me to somehow transform into Ryan or Thomas? Your plans for me to spend money we do not have on things we do not need to impress people who do not care about us. Those were never my plans. This is about that stupid toilet video, is not it? She said, her tone suddenly shifting to one of exasperation. You are being incredibly sensitive. It was just a joke, I shook my head. The video was not a joke. It was the final evidence of something I should have recognized years ago. You do not respect me. You do not love me. You might never have. That is not true, she protested, though her eyes darted away from mine. I have always supported you. Really. Let us look at the evidence. I pulled out my phone and opened a document I had prepared. Here are screenshots of 27 separate social media posts where you publicly mocked me in the last year alone. Here are text messages from your friends responding to things you said about me that you never told me directly. And here, I continued, switching to another file, is a complete accounting of the $20,000 in credit card debt you have hidden from me. Margaret's face paled. You went through my private messages. You had no right. I had every right to understand the truth of my marriage, I countered. And the truth is that this has not been a partnership for a very long time, if ever. What followed was the most honest conversation of our marriage. Though conversation might be too generous a term for Margaret's increasing panic as she realized I was serious. She cycled through anger accusations, and when those failed, tearful pleas about how she would change, how things would be different. I listened calmly, acknowledging her words but not swayed by them. When she had exhausted herself, I simply said, I have already spoken with a lawyer. You will be receiving divorce papers next week. I suggest you find your own legal representation. The mention of lawyers transformed Margaret again. Her tearful vulnerability vanished, replaced by cold fury. You will regret this, she hissed. You are nothing without me. Who do you think you are? I smiled, slightly, feeling more certain than ever about my decision. I am someone who deserves basic respect and kindness. Something I had forgotten until recently. That weekend, with Frank's help, I moved the remainder of my belongings to the new apartment. Margaret alternated between ignoring me completely and making desperate attempts to convince me to stay. She even called some of her friends to come over and help persuade me. But they seemed uncomfortable with the task, perhaps recognizing that the dynamic between us had truly shifted. My new place was a revelation. Though smaller than our shared apartment, it felt spacious in its freedom. I arranged my belongings thoughtfully, creating a space that reflected my tastes and interests without compromise. The view of the park offered a tranquility I had not experienced in years. Each morning I woke feeling lighter, more myself. At work, my renewed focus and energy paid dividends. Within 2 weeks, I was asked to take on additional responsibilities with a corresponding pay increase. Colleagues commented on the positive change. They noticed how I seemed more confident in meetings, more willing to assert my ideas. Frank and other friends I had neglected during my marriage became regular visitors to my new home. We reinstated traditions that had fallen away, like monthly poker nights and weekend hiking trips. I rediscovered parts of myself that had been suppressed under the weight of Margaret's constant disapproval. As the legal proceedings for our divorce began, I learned through mutual acquaintances that Margaret was struggling. Her extravagant spending had always been predicated on my reliable income covering the basics, now responsible only for herself. She was facing financial reality for the first time. The final blow to her carefully constructed social image came when she was laid off from her marketing position during a company restructuring. Her network of affluent friends, it seemed, was less interested in maintaining connections with someone who could no longer keep up with their lifestyle. The woman who had recorded me at my lowest moment was experiencing a downfall of her own though I took no pleasure in her difficulties. 3 weeks after I moved into my new apartment, my phone lit up with Margaret's name, not once or twice, but 13 times in succession. I let each call go to voicemail, unprepared to engage with whatever crisis had prompted this sudden need for contact. The voicemails progressed from demanding to pleading. Margaret's carefully cultivated image of success was crumbling rapidly. Without my income supporting her lifestyle, the credit card debt had become unmanageable. Her layoff had come at the worst possible time, and her expensive friends had distanced themselves once she could no longer participate in their costly activities. "Please, Brent," her final message implored. "I need you to reconsider what you are doing. We can work this out. I have changed. I understand now what I did wrong." After consulting with my lawyer, I agreed to meet Margaret at a neutral location, a coffee shop midway between our respective homes. When she arrived, I barely recognized her. Gone was the designer clothing and perfect makeup. Her hair was pulled back simply, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I have been trying to reach you." "I know," I replied. 13 calls is hard to miss. She winced at my direct reference to her desperation. "I deserve that. I deserve a lot worse, actually." She took a deep breath. "Brent, I am sorry. I am so sorry for how I treated you, for the video, for everything. I was cruel and thoughtless and completely wrong." The apology seemed genuine, her eyes filling with tears as she spoke. In a strange way, I felt nothing, not anger, nor satisfaction, nor pity. Just a calm certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. "I appreciate you saying that," I said simply. "Is that all?" she asked, leaning forward. "I am telling you, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I took you for granted. I was awful to you when you were nothing but supportive and kind. Please give me another chance. I can be better. I will be better." I considered her words carefully before responding. "Margaret, I believe you regret your actions, and I forgive you. But that does not mean I can or should return to our marriage." "But we could start over," she insisted. "I have learned my lesson. Losing everything has shown me what really matters." "That is exactly the problem," I said gently. "You only recognized the value of respect and kindness when you lost the financial stability I provided. That is not love, Margaret. That is convenience." She began to cry in earnest then. Not the controlled tears she had used to manipulate me in the past, but deep body-shaking sobs. People at nearby tables glanced over uncomfortably. "What am I supposed to do now?" she asked between sobs. "Everything is falling apart. I lost my job. My friends barely return my calls. I might lose the apartment." "You will figure it out," I said with confidence. "You are smart and capable. This is your opportunity to build a life that is authentically yours, not one designed to impress others." We talked for nearly an hour. I maintained my boundaries while offering what I could: forgiveness, closure, and the dignity of honest conversation. When we finally parted, Margaret seemed different, smaller but somehow more real than she had been in our entire relationship. In the months that followed our coffee shop meeting, I focused on my own healing journey. I joined a support group for people recovering from emotional abuse, finding comfort and insight in shared experiences. I learned to recognize the warning signs of unhealthy relationships and to value my own needs and boundaries. My career continued to flourish as I pursued opportunities without the constant drain of Margaret's disapproval. I reconnected with old hobbies, finding joy in photography, and hiking activities Margaret had dismissed as boring or pointless. New friendships developed, naturally, relationships based on mutual respect and genuine connection rather than social climbing or appearance. I even began cautiously dating again, approaching potential relationships with a clearer understanding of what healthy love should look like. Looking back now, I can see that night on the bathroom floor as a strange gift. In my weakest physical moment, faced with the undeniable evidence of my wife's contempt, I found the strength to reclaim my life. The man who crawled on cold tiles with a fever of 102 degrees was not pathetic as Margaret's video caption claimed. He was enduring. He was resilient. He was doing his best with the situation at hand. That is the most valuable lesson I learned through all of this. Your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. True strength is not found in material success or social status, but in the quiet dignity of being true to yourself in setting healthy boundaries, and in the courage to walk away from relationships that diminish rather than enhance your part. Spirit. Have you ever experienced someone recording or sharing your vulnerable moments without permission? How did you handle that violation of trust? Share your stories in the comments below, and do not forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes what feels like rock bottom is actually the foundation for building a better life.